This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 47, about Agent Carter, episode 4, Smoke and Mirrors. Welcome back, Defenders, to episode 47 of Defenders TV Podcast. This time we're talking about Agent Carter, episode 4, Smoke and Mirrors. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi, I am one of your other hosts, John, and we are joined here by a very special guest, Claire, all the way from Defenders Podcast. Claire, how are you doing? And what is your thoughts about Agent Carter in general? Just quickly.
I'm doing.
No pressure.
I thought you were going to say all the way from London, but it was the
all the way from London, exactly. Across the pond of the Irish Sea is Claire joining us from London.
In London, in rainy London. I'm doing well, thanks, guys. I'm really glad to be here because we've recorded with you guys before for Defenders Podcast. It gets very confusing because it's Defenders Podcast and Defenders TV Podcast, but we're always saying how on my podcast how much we love you guys, so it's always nice to chat with you. And I love Agent Carter so much. I want to be Peggy Carter when I grow up. I love her. I love it so much. Yeah, I can't. That's all I can really say about it.
Great show.
So good, so good. And I prefer it to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is controversial in some circles, but it's so much better.
Some circles it might be, yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely that nostalgic feel, but also just like kick-ass Peggy. You've got Dottie as well, and now you've got Whitney. Like three great female leads for me. All rolled into this like fantastic season, and like it's so good that there's 10 episodes instead of the 8 from season 1. So they've expanded it. It's brilliant. It's like such a good show for me, and we're really pleased to have you with us, Claire.
Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually said on our podcast the other day that I was saying that I think 10 is kind of the perfect length for a series, because you get a lot of series that are like 22 episodes and they're just too long. The Netflix shows are 13, but they still feel like they have a little bit of filler in them. But I think 10 is like just the perfect length. Like between 8 and 10 just seems to be fast paced, no filler.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
I
definitely agree with that. I don't mind the 13 episodes of the Netflix, but I know sometimes you can feel that, that episode maybe just was a bit too fillery kind of thing. But like on our Gotham podcast, we do 22 episodes. And I think certainly for season 1, it was more, I just felt the length of time to podcast. It's 22 weeks and it becomes a long time after a while. Whereas 13 are nice and sort of close and concentrated. And certainly on Netflix, when they all come out together, it means you can do them however you want to, really. It gives you that kind of flexibility. But 22 is a long, set series to cover. And this is nice. We originally did season 1 because we were between, the end of Daredevil and the start of Gotham. And it finally got released onto UK and Irish TV. And we said, let's do this in our kind of off time, and just loved it. Absolutely loved the series.
Absolutely. And Claire, do you want to tell the listeners a bit about your podcast and what you cover and the way you approach the Defenders series, I suppose?
Yeah, we're called the Defenders Podcast because we're covering the Netflix shows leading up to the Defenders series. So far that's been Daredevil season 1 and Jessica Jones, which you guys obviously cover as well. But we do it in a slightly different way because we do an episode a week, whereas you guys tend to do it in a more condensed manner because of the way some people watch the show is they'll watch it, it's designed for binge watching. The reason we do it an episode a week is because out of the hosts on the podcast, I am the only one that will binge watch it. So for instance, when Daredevil season 1 came out, I started watching it, I think at 8 p.m. at night and finished at 9 a.m. the next morning. I watched it in one go. And then we started recording about it the next day. And my co-hosts, Matt, Mel and Robin, are newbies. So they won't have seen a lot of the stories about the show before. They won't have read really any spoilers. They won't have seen the trailers, and they'll be watching an episode a week, which means they don't know what's going to happen next, and also it means that I can really wind them up about it, which is hilarious. Which I really
it leads to some really fun situations where I hear Robin, particularly, he posits some thoughts that could be very connected to his version of comic books or his version of TV shows that he's seen before, and you can kind of hear the sly grin in Claire's voice as she goes, "You're so wrong."
You can hear my hands rubbing together, going.
Absolutely.
And we've got a good mix of co-hosts as well, because I'm a big comic book fan, particularly of the characters of Jessica Jones and particularly Daredevil, which I do have a tattoo of. But Robin as well really loves comic books. Matt is knowledgeable about some comic books, but not these particular characters. And Mel, as we tease her a lot, knows nothing about comic books. So it's a nice mix. So Mel is literally watching the shows as a television series. I'm watching Daredevil with the baggage, if you like, of being a fan since I was 10 years old of the character. So we get like a lot of different opinions. It's a little bit more anarchic, is that a word? Filled with anarchy more than your podcast. But I blame that on the fact that the other three are North Americans. So yeah.
must be
on them. I'm the only Brit, yeah.
And Claire, where can any of our listeners tap in to listen to you guys podcast?
Well, thank you for asking. It's good that you reminded me where people could earlier. So if we're on wordpress.com as Defenders Podcast, or Twitter at Defenders Pod, which is pretty much just me. Tweeting stuff. Or if you look on iTunes, if you search for all caps Defenders Podcast, we'll come up on there as well. And we've released bonus
avoid
episodes.
The religious.
Yes, there will be one that comes up, which is William Lane Craig, is it? It's a religious one, I think.
That's right.
This podcast.
Dr.
That's
William Craig.
not our one.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
In fact, a true story for our listeners, which we've never actually talked about. The reason why we called our podcast Defenders TV Podcast was just so we wouldn't get confused with Dr. Blake.
And the reason we actually got in contact with you guys in the first place was because we were told, we were with a previous network, and we were told we had to call ours Defenders Podcast. And I think that was the first time I messaged you guys, was to say,
That's right.
I just want to say we're not going to step on your toes, and, we're not copying you, and I hope we can be friends. And I think that's kind of how we got in contact.
Yeah.
And look at us, a year on, we've met Robin at New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
We live 40 minutes away from you, basically, by flight, Claire, and we've never met you, but we've been on 2 podcasts with you now. So
yeah, this is our second podcast.
Yeah.
We have to meet up at some point.
And of course, for our listeners, you can find us, as always, on defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, or search Defenders TV Podcast on any other good podcast catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Such as Podcast Addict, Player FM, or Stitcher, if you so wish.
Yes. I added a few more this week. I added Acast this week, which I'm really enjoying as a podcast catcher. Really good. A couple of other places to find us. Right, I think it's time to get into our news and a bit of announcements as we go through.
You guys have so much more technical knowledge than I have. I'm like, podcasts, they just appear magically when Robin uploads them. Some kind of Harry Potter witchcraft. I don't know.
It feels like it sometimes, but I just I searched through Android for the word podcast, and then I add our podcast to it. That's basically how I work.
That's a good plan. Yeah.
There you go. So first off, a quick announcement. We will be going to the Star Fury Ultimates event, which will be taking place in Blackpool in the UK on June 10th to 12th this year. The reason why we're going along, it would be very important for a lot of our UK listeners. The event features 3 guests who are from the Agent Carter TV series, including the wonderful Hayley Atwell, who obviously plays Peggy Carter, but also Enver Jokai, who plays Chief Daniel Sousa. Almost called him Captain Daniel Sousa or Lieutenant Daniel Sousa there. And it also features the wonderful Bridget Reagan, who plays
Dottie
Underwood. Really, really excited to go across to this event.
Yeah, we're going to be armed with our questions, our Blackpool Rock, our fish and chips, our Blackpool Illuminations.
Your unmarked van and your nets.
Yeah. We will ride in on beach donkeys, give a little sort of yeehaw as we come into the hotel conference area. But there's also Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's Brett Dalton. He plays Agent Ward from S.H.I.E.L.D. And there's also then characters from Gotham, which is one of our other podcasts, obviously Gotham TV podcast. There is going to be Cameron Beacon-Dover, Robin Lord Taylor, as well as Drew Powell.
Yes, former guest of the show.
Nice.
On Gotham TV podcast. As well then Arrow. Some characters from Arrow, which I can't remember their names. Definitely can't remember.
I generally don't remember the guys on Arrow. I watch it. I think I've seen every episode, but I don't remember most of the episodes I've seen.
There is the chief of the Starling City Police.
Yes.
Who is actually a British guy.
Yeah.
Who does a very interesting American accent that makes him seem like he's got a lisp.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. I love the way he talks.
Yes.
I think it might have been the Sean Connery School of Acting that he went to.
So we will ask him pertinent questions about his method.
Yes. Yes, that's the first announcement. Claire, you're heading up to Blackpool at all?
I'm. Do you know what? It's in the summer. I will try and make it. I'm very poor at the moment because I'm only working 2 days a week, and then I'm drawing the rest of the time. And artists are notoriously poor. You know, I'm living the artistic poverty dream. But if I can afford it, then I will try and make it. Obviously not to meet any of the celebrities, just to meet you guys, the real guests of honour.
Excellent. Well, if any of the listeners do want to see us at the event, just make sure you get in contact with us. We're at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. You'll probably see us walking around. I think we have our Defenders TV podcast t-shirts, don't we?
And our Gotham TV podcast.
Yes, they're in storage, so you'll probably see us around there.
They're rolled out every time we go to a Comic-Con, just in case someone spots us. I think it is only Robin, actually, from Defenders podcast that... Well, no, there's a few more, but certainly from the Marvel world, it's Robin from Defenders podcast that recognized us or recognized you, I think. Or you recognized him. I can't remember how it happened, but it happened over a steamy, sweaty, geeky conference center in New York.
Yes, it does. I don't know whether we'll be able to fit into the t-shirts if we go to more geeky conference centers. Anyway, yes. So if you want to attend the event, the Ultimates event, just look for starfury.co.uk. You'll be able to pick up tickets for the Ultimates. Looking forward to heading along to that. One other bit of news that we want to talk about, which we haven't talked about in the podcast before. It's great that Claire's going to be here for this discussion, because it's kind of a weird discussion. We're 4 episodes in the UK and Ireland for Agent Carter, and there's been a lot of discussions about what's happening with some of the cast members and some of the crew on the show. The biggest piece of news that's come out recently is that Hayley Atwell has been cast in a pilot, also for ABC, called Conviction, and she's got the lead role in the pilot. And this has led to a ton of speculation that means that this is the end and the final episodes of Agent Carter. Claire, what's your thoughts on this?
I kind of hope that it doesn't mean the end of Agent Carter. Maybe it just means that they'll do a shorter 3rd season, so they'll go back down to 8 episodes, or they do like 6 episodes or something, and it's on the same network, so could be filmed around the schedule for Conviction, if Conviction gets picked up, because obviously she's doing the pilot for Conviction, but it might not get picked up, we don't know. I really hope that she does both, because I think I love the show. I think it's a great character to have on TV. To have this, this was the female-led show that since then we've had Jessica Jones and Supergirl, but this one was kind of the first. I think it's an important show to have from the point of view of it's a female character that doesn't necessarily have superpowers, but still kicks butt, which is great. So yeah, and I think I said to you guys earlier, I would love Agent Carter to go for the next 50 years and us to have Hayley Atwell playing Agent Carter, and in the days of Ant-Man, when the character appeared in Ant-Man, or The Winter Soldier, right up until Peggy Carter's deathbed. I want her to be the most prolific Marvel character because I love her. So I'm really hoping it doesn't get cancelled, and as I've said, I prefer the show by a large amount to Agents of Shield, and I will be very upset if it gets cancelled. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same. I kind of don't want to believe that this might happen.
Mhm.
I think, as Derek said, it's like there's a lot of speculation. I think it's down to maybe the numbers in the US and the ratings of the second season. Then there's obviously this casting news for Hayley Atwell. But again, I think you're right. It's the same network. It's only a pilot. It may never see the light of day, although I hope, obviously, for Hayley Atwell that it has huge take up and success. But you're right, it's on the same network. They can schedule it in if need be. So I think there's still a long way to go before it would be confirmed. I like your suggestion that maybe it would come down back to 8 episodes to help with scheduling. But yeah, definitely. It's more, I don't want it to end. I think it's really solidly written. And one of the things for me is that it's hugely rewatchable. I mean, even this episode that we're going to discuss today, I watched it again because initially I watched it and I kind of didn't really feel too much for it on the back of episode 3, which was so great. I mean, I loved episode 3. I watched this again thinking, well, that influenced me. And the more I watch it, the more I saw stuff to think about. And actually now, after 2 watches of this episode, well, in fact, 3 watches of this episode, I'm really liked it. Yeah. It pulled it up from something. And I found that with season 1 as well. I think, had repeat watching of it and it just improved. So I think they're really well acted, well written, and there's some great fun chemistry on the show, which it would be difficult to miss that, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think it's doing reasonably well in the ratings. Not great, but ABC is a slightly different network being involved with Disney as well. This is another side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I suppose, and they are trying to expand it and trying to keep that on board. They have also announced the direct spin-off show from Agents of Shield, which is Marvel's Most Wanted, featuring Bobby Morse and Hunter. 2 of my favorite characters from Agents of Shield. But it's very possible that we could have maybe a year off for Agent Carter and then it comes back the following year in that gap, during the 22 episode season of Shield. That is a possibility. It's not, that's definitely not out of the realm. They could also move it to a summer show to make it stand out a bit more. But yeah, there's loads of options available. And I definitely, as an opinion on my side, I definitely don't think this is the end for Agent Carter, especially, since it does seem to have a legion of fans. You go to any Comic-Con, and you are now seeing a huge amount of Hayley Atwell cosplay. There's so many people that are so into this. Yeah,
definitely.
And I think even if the show ended, it wouldn't be the last we'd see of the character. Whether they did they brought the series back in another way, like a mini series, almost like the episodes they do of Sherlock. Just do like a 3 episode thing. Like, there's no way Marvel would stop the character because she's so popular, and you've got that entire breadth of almost of the 20th century to play with the character. It would be I think it would be a bad idea to not use that to its full potential, almost like they've done Fox have done with the most recent X-Men movies featuring the 60s, 70s, 80s and tied it in with events going on at the time. You could do that with Peggy Carter. And
Absolutely.
With the development of S.H.I.E.L.D., you've got the character of Howard Stark, you've got these characters, you can do that. One of the complaints I've seen about Agent Carter is going, well, we know where it's going to end because we know what happens with... And it's like, well, no, because you know about the big picture. But that doesn't mean that it's not interesting to find out about this character. We learn a lot about the character in this week's episode that we didn't know, and
absolutely,
that stuff's great. One of the other things I wanted to mention quickly, sorry guys, was I've said before on my podcast as well. The reason I love the shows that Netflix are doing is the characters are a lot more grounded than some areas in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Particularly we've had Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and they've always been the characters that I've been more drawn towards, rather than characters, say, I love Guardians of the Galaxy, but more the sort of, space characters. in the Avengers, I always loved Captain America more than Thor, for instance. So Captain America was the first Avenger was my favorite solo film out of phase one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think that's why I love Agent Carter as well, because even though it dabbles in sci-fi a bit, and it's kind of going a bit more sci-fi in season 2 than season 1, it still feels very grounded. It's grounded in real events in American history and in British history. And that's why I love it. And the character feels very real. She doesn't have superpowers, and that's the characters I've been drawn to.
Yeah, that current events thing, as you say, of that period, it also just adds the depth to the characters. But from season 1, you had Peggy striving to be recognized as a woman in her job against the prejudice or bias of men. You have now with Dr. Wilkes, you've got that idea of people of different races sort of being professional experts, scientists, but still being treated as second-class citizens, and that kind of what that builds into and the context of that, as well as still the role of women in society and sort of moving towards this McCarthyism within Agent Carter at the moment. So there's loads of different threads that kind of all come through, which I think really adds to not only the show, but I think just to the Marvel universe as it's written.
Absolutely,
Definitely.
yeah. And I love the opportunity that's given to them to have these 8 or 10 episodes to kind of talk much more detail about the universe, which you don't get with a film. A lot of films have to, they have a big overarching story with a villain where you don't get to spend time with the characters in their downtime, So I love the fact that we do have that. And what a great way to set us up for our discussion about this week's episode.
Absolutely. But first off as well, we should obviously point out that Chris isn't here.
Do you know what makes it so much worse?
What?
The end of last week's episode was the first episode he'd introduced in about 4 episodes. And we ended it saying, we get a break from you leading up episode.
But we should just mention that Christopher, one of our other hosts, isn't with us. He's away in Barcelona, sunny Barcelona. We're stuck in rainy old Dublin here, a bit like London. But he is presumably sunning himself, building his tan. Sorry, I mean working hard at the Global Mobile Conference or that he's at. So he will be with us hopefully next episode.
Yes, absolutely. So I think with that, it's time to get on to our discussion about Agent Carter, Season 2, Episode 4, Smoke and Mirrors. This episode was directed by David Platt. He directed Episode 3 of Agent Carter as well. It's written by Sue M. Chung, newly on board in the writer's room for this season of Agent Carter. She joined in Season 2 as the lead story editor for the show. It's kind of evident, really, that she's a lead story editor, given that she's talking about a lot of flashbacks and a lot of kind of backstory for these characters. It seems like that's probably a good perspective to have if you're really looking at the show overall and what the other writers are delivering, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
John, do you want to tell us what Sue gave us this week?
Yeah, here goes the synopsis. In a series of flashbacks to the early lives of Peggy Carter and Agnes Cully, aka Whitney Frost, we see 2 exceptional and talented women reflected back at one another. Both driven, both out of their time, and both know their value. On the one hand, Agnes Cully from Oklahoma, brilliant with an inventive mind, and who feels held back from academic success due to her gender. That is, until the Hollywood door is opened with the use of her good looks and charm. And on the other hand, Peggy Carter from Hampstead in England, who forges a career in the field with the Special Operations Executive, in spite of her stifling fiancé Fred, and to honour the tragic death of her much-loved brother, Michael. Meanwhile, back in 1947, Whitney Frost begins to experiment with her newfound power as Carter and Jarvis attempt to learn more about Frost and Chadwick by kidnapping their bodyguard, Mr. Hunt. Following the interrogation of Hunt, he is bugged and allowed to escape, where they track him back to Senator Chadwick's apartment. As he attempts to blackmail Chadwick in exchange for protection, Frost reveals her dangerous secret and proves once and for all that she is more than just a pretty face.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does. If this is your first time listening to us, if you're joining us from the Defenders podcast, or Claire, if this is your first time joining us, obviously we'll give you a bit of a rundown of how we do our episodes. We discuss our top 5 points about the episode, some good, some bad, and between the three of us, we'll hopefully cover everything about the episode that we want to talk about. We'll then give a bit of a rating at the end and see whether we defend the episode or not. So, Claire, as our guest, would you like to give us your first point?
A big bonus for this episode was the supporting cast for me. I love Chris Mulkey and I love Kurtwood Smith. Yes. I love that both of them were in the episode. Chris Mulkey, I've been a fan of since his days in Twin Peaks, my number one TV show of all time. And he's been in like tons of stuff, and apparently he's a complete sweetheart. My co-host Matt and Mel have both met him.
Really?
So yeah, they met him at the Twin Peaks Festival, and they said he was really cool.
Great.
They got a great photo with, I think he's pretending to strangle one of them or something. I can't remember. But yeah, it's great seeing him. He doesn't have that much to do in this episode, but I just like it whenever he pops up and stuff. And Kurtwood Smith, everyone sort of, I know, says, oh, it's Red from That 70s Show, which I've never seen. But to me, he's always going to be Clarence Bodica from RoboCop, one of my favourite films.
Yeah, you're so on my side. That's how I introduced him when we saw him in the last episode, I think.
Yeah.
That's how I introduced him to everybody. I was like, he's the guy from RoboCop. And Chris was going, oh, yeah, RoboCop. Yep. I said That 70s Show, and Chris was going, yeah, That 70s Show, of course, it's Red.
And now he's in That 40s Show.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I love every time he's on screen. He's so slimy. It's like we had with in season 1, when with Ray Wise as well, also from Twin Peaks. They both play slimy guys really well, and I just love it. I like him going up against Sousa as well. So I just wanted to mention that as one of my thumbs up as the supporting cast in this episode.
Definitely. John, do you want to give us your first point?
Yeah, mine is the flashbacks, actually, just on a general point. The mirrors, I presume, from the smoke and mirrors in the title. Maybe the smoke is the dark matter, or the zero matter, I should say. But this, the reflection, I thought, of these two heroines, ultimately, that of Whitney Frost, Agnes Cully, and Peggy Carter, I really liked. I think it was part of the reason why I did have to watch this episode again, to really kind of just get the flavor of these flashbacks, because it was basically saying these two women were cut from the same cloth. They were driven, ultimately by different means. One, I think, with Agnes in spite of maybe her mother and the men that she kept. And for Peggy, she was driven because of tragedy in her life with the death of her brother, but also because of a stifling fiance, as I said in the synopsis, who really was saying kind of, well, the world of spies and sabotage is not the world for my Peggy. But she goes on to work in the field. And I loved these flashbacks and how they reflected on both these ladies, and how ultimately it kind of is there then in the present day within the series in 1947, with them both being incredibly confident, but obviously on other sides fighting one another. You can see that Whitney Frost knows Peggy is a threat as soon as Mr. Hunt says that he's been interrogated by her. What did you tell her? She knows that Peggy is a threat. Yeah. And I think that's because reflected back in that mirror is another Whitney Frost for her, but with different motives and with different reasons, So I loved that about this episode. I thought it really, really was a good little. I thought this was a really good sort of little motif to bring in, because you don't see too many flashbacks in Peggy Carter, in Agent Carter. Mm-hmm.
It also follows the trend of like the mirror of Peggy being a blonde, because in season 1 we had Dottie, and in season 2 we have Whitney. So to her brunette.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. It kind of struck me as something similar to what was used in Daredevil, the flashbacks to Kingpin as a kid, and seeing the kind of parallels between those two characters that we saw throughout Daredevil. What I love is the backstory of Whitney Foster, and obviously this was also one of my points. It's one of the big elements of the episode, really. But I kind of was just looking and focusing at Whitney Frost's flashbacks and what she goes through. I kind of like the fact that the first time you see her, she's fixing a radio. It's showing how intelligent she is. She's able to take care of the electronics in her mom's house. But she's told to just stop doing it, all the time. She's put down constantly. She's told to use her looks to get ahead instead of trying to use her brain because nobody cares. You're never going to go to college, even though you're a smart kid kind of thing, you know? She's clearly hugely talented at these kind of scientific endeavors, but is being told to go into a film career. This is what you can do. This is how you'll get ahead. But nobody really cares what's in your head. They only care what your body looks like, you know?
Yeah.
Really tough. And it seems totally at odds to what Peggy's gone through, particularly with her brother, who's, again, as you said, hugely supportive.
And he's the one that obviously recommended that Peggy go into the SOE, the Special Operations Executive. So like she's supported, whereas Whitney, in a sense, isn't. She's been told to default to what would be expected, but she ultimately uses that to her own advantage because you can't keep a clever girl down. You know, and it's, she uses that. And I love that sort of realization from her with the agent outside of the cinema, towards the end of the episode, where she, you know, she kind of just realizes, this is my way in. This is how I get
whatever you
influence.
want to be.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Following on from your point as well, saying about with the first time we see Whitney, she's fixing a radio. The first time we see Peggy, she's dressed as a superhero.
That's right.
She's very, very cool.
Taking down dragons, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I love the juxtaposition of these two characters. A really well plotted out idea, just to show both of them had opportunities in life, and some of them were taken away from them, and some of them were pushed into the right situation. So I'm going to take that as my first point. So while it did cross over with yours, John, it's very similar. Claire, do you want to give us your next one?
Yeah, my next one is kind of a down point, but it's got good in it as well. It's that I would like Sousa to win in an interrogation, and then I wrote, damn it, because I love, with a bit of backstory, I love the actor Enver Chai. I think he's fantastic. He was one of the best things about Dollhouse.
Absolutely, definitely.
He really proved what a great actor he is in that. And after Dollhouse was cancelled and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started and Joss Whedon was doing the Avengers, I was like, please don't let this amazing actor just be this cop in one scene in the Avengers. Like, he's so good. Please use him to his potential, because he's great. And I was really excited that he was in this. I know it was important for Peggy's character in this episode, but there was the bit where he was doing the interrogation, and then he's like, oh, how did you get that leg? Like, and he says the story, and the guy's like, yeah, well, I was in Japan and, you know, whatever. And kind of, and then it's Peggy has to step up and do the interrogation and get results. And in season 1, we had it, you know, where he was trying to get information out of the homeless guy and didn't get anywhere because the guy, again, it became like about his leg, and it was Thompson that got the interrogation. And I'm just kind of like, I would like to see him win in an interrogation and to show that he's this very, very smart guy. And he's not the he's the chief for a reason, you know? And I would just like that, not only from the point of view for the character, but I would like to see the actor play that. On the flip side, I would also, in a bigger scheme, I would love to see them give him some more comedic stuff to do, because he's a great comedic actor. He's a very, very good mimic, which he proved in Dollhouse. He's hilarious, and I would like to see that. I don't know how they would write it in, but that would be cool as well. So that was just one of my more down points, is that I kind of wish that they'd had him come up with that idea instead in the episode. I know it's Peggy's show, but I want him to win an interrogation, to get an interrogation.
Although, speaking of comedic elements, I must say, I thought the way he took the punch from Mr. Hunt
Yeah.
and the way he fell, I thought there was something that I kind of laughed, I chuckled at in the way that he fell. It was slightly comedic. It didn't lose any of the power of the punch. And then obviously for, Haley Atwell to pop up from behind the shelving and to say, well, he's tried to throttle me twice. You know, this was the least you could do. I thought there was some nice sort of comedy value, definitely in there. And I liked the way that, Sousa took that punch. It felt like a punch, but it was the way he fell. It made me chuckle.
Absolutely.
I remember the first time I saw that scene, I was like, no, don't put your gun right up against his back, which is something that always annoys me in films because you know the character's going to turn and like grab the gun. But then once you realise that they were setting it up for him to escape, I was like, oh, it makes sense. Oh, that's fine. I kind of will let you off.
We'll let you off that one, absolutely.
Yeah, my sort of flip from that point as well, sorry, it's quite a long point, is I almost wish there was less Jarvis comedy as well, Jarvis slapstick. Although I love Jarvis slapstick, I think they can sometimes go overboard with his character, and I wish they would give some of the comedic opportunities to other characters. And I wrote in my notes, if this makes sense to any people who've watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Jarvis can be more Giles and less Wesley.
Oh yes, that definitely makes sense.
And I mean Wesley and Buffy, not Wesley and Angel, who is my favourite character in those shows. There was some great bits in this, like I love him saying Jarvelous, which was amazing.
You've just taken one of my points.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
You can scrub that out. That's fine. I said nothing.
No, you're fine.
But I sometimes I find, and particularly in season 2, the slapstick a bit too much. And again, James Darcy is an excellent dramatic actor, so you can give him both. It doesn't just have to be Jarvis slapstick, and comedy all the time. So I wish they would kind of even those characters out. So it was a very big point. I'm sorry, guys.
That's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. We always like the big points. I'm really hoping, I totally agree with you, Claire. I'm really hoping that now 4 episodes in, it's time to show a bit more depth to the Jarvis character. He didn't have a huge amount there. He's the kind of backup man, and he's the guy who went to bed at 9 in the evening after with a cup of tea, in the first season. And this season he is kind of the slapstick guy. We've got a bit more episodes this season, so hopefully we'll see a bit more of his character as we go throughout. It's great to meet Anna Jarvis over the last couple of episodes, and hopefully we'll get to see her back and see a bit more of their relationship, and hopefully a bit more depth to Jarvis, and a bit less slapstick from him. I think the one scene for me in this episode was him speaking as he was asleep on the couch, saying, Mom, that's the tallest horse I've ever seen, or the largest horse I've ever seen. It was just absolutely ridiculous. It was way beyond just funny. It seemed beyond ridiculous. So hopefully we can get back to a bit more of Jarvis in the next couple of episodes.
And in regards to James Darcy, sorry, I would just say it breaks my heart that we'll never get a crossover appearance of Jarvis interacting with Matt Murdock, because Charlie Cox and James Darcy are apparently like the best of friends in real life, like really good friends. And I'm like, oh, I'd love for them to appear together, but obviously it's never going to happen, sadly.
It may be a voice that he might hear at some point in the future.
Maybe.
Well, I was just quickly going to defend the Jarvis slapstick. I think I definitely get you. I think it might be going a bit too far now at this stage, and it could do with a bit of reining back, but I'd still like the Jarvelous.
Absolutely.
Still like the Jarvelous. You've got to have a catchphrase, I think. But also, I did like the sort of, the cute exterior belies a foul temperament in relation to the koala. You have to say they are dangerous animals. Killers, in fact, that lurk in the Australian bush.
That is true. I did like that was our Bernard watch for this week. We did get a little mention of the dastardly flamingo this week, but that is not what's causing Jarvis to go hunting. It is the koala. So.
And there was rhinos as well. So yeah, a lot of exotic animals being thrown up.
I've also incidentally just completed a drawing of Agent Carter for the TV series, and I made sure I included Bernard the Flamingo in it.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's excellent.
I know he's become quite the celebrity, really,
Yes.
since he moved to
Devil
LA.
in Pink. Like me when I was 18. Derek, what's your next point?
My next point is I'm wondering if Peggy Carter invented man flu. 'Cause I'm quite impressed. So she
Like
gave,
I've got at the moment.
yes, exactly, John, exactly.
I'm dying.
So she gave quite an intense cold to Mr. Hunt, but he reacts to it as if he's dying. I really like this. I like how it's written, and again, being written by Sue Chung, I'm wondering if there's just a little in joke there on the reaction from a man to an intense cold, as opposed to what Peggy calls an intense cold. So I'm wondering if he kind of feels that it's man flu. Did she invent it?
I think it was Howard.
Well, oh yes, of course.
Howard. He was trying to invent, was it a cure for the common flu?
Yeah.
And instead invented something that gave you the symptoms much more rapidly, much more severe for a period of 8 hours or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good going, Howard. Good going.
With that, Claire, do you want to give us your next point?
Sure, sorry. Yeah, my next point is I love that Peggy was at Bletchley Park.
Oh, yes.
That's awesome. I love the idea that she was there the same time as Alan Turing. It makes me really happy.
too.
I love that. And in kind of next to that as well, I love that there's like the mention of Bletchley Park, and I love we get the mentions as well of some of the American history, like the Hollywood 10, which would have been happening at, I think it's November 1947. So it would have been happening right around this time, which, if anyone's seen the film, I think that's out at the moment or out very soon, Trumbo, is about the Hollywood 10. He was one of them. And the assassination of President McKinley. Most of the knowledge I know about the assassination of President McKinley, I know from the musical Assassins by Stephen Sondheim. I know that's terrible way of getting your knowledge.
All right.
But I know there was a lot of conspiracy theories around his assassination because he was assassinated by an anarchist in New York, in Buffalo, like northern New York State. The assassin was Leon Czolgosz, I'm like trying to remember, and I think it was in 1901. So if that's the case, that's obviously almost 50 years before the events that are happening in the show. So it shows that they've had their fingers in a lot of stuff for quite a long time.
Absolutely,
which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, no, this was also one of my points with Bletchley Park and Turing. Absolutely great, really good nod back to that side of the British war effort in World War II. I think it was also mentioned in season 1 as well by Jose Molina, the writer for episode 5, and I think that's where it kind of comes in. And also then the special operations executive, and like that, the SOE was established there for people to go, and it was espionage, it was sabotage behind German lines on mainland Europe, to kind of almost sleeper agents as well for to aid the resistance, the French resistance, the other resistance groups against the Nazis. Fantastic little nod, because it did so much. I mean, it also could cause huge tragedy. I think it was in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia. I think because of SOE work there, I think they killed Heinrich Himmler, big SS guard, or not SS guard, a big SS sort of chief, and I think because of those actions, because of that local help to the Czech resistance, there was the sort of massacres that went on in Czechoslovakia against the local population. So, I mean, it was fraught with danger, but it's a really important organization that came out of that whole war effort against the Nazis in the Second World War. And so I love these nods. I'm a bit of a history buff as well. I like this period of history. Just sort of like my dad being involved in the RAF and so on. So I find this really interesting kind of time, but it's great to have these little nods, and as you say, Claire, like the nods back as well to American history as well. I mean, even just like with the formation of the FBI being mentioned, we have Vernon Masters there talking about tidal waves coming, and you kind of think, is this McCarthyism, or is it just something to do with the show, or is it, it's both tied up neatly together? Like it's kind of one of the things that we were talking about earlier, that it just adds so much richness to all this storyline. It's really
definitely.
nice. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that your point, John?
No, because I had that point, you see. That's why. So
Stealing all your points.
I wanted to back up Claire with her point, with the stuff that I'd got for my own point. I probably went on too long, but
no, not at all.
Talking about massacres and stuff.
I just had a tiny point about Bletchley Park as well, which you kind of mentioned about the callback to season 1. What I particularly like about it is effectively in season 1, it's shown that Peggy kind of out code breaks the best code breaker in the US. And I like the fact that they call out the fact that she worked in Bletchley Park, but not only that, she's also the best code breaker that works in Bletchley Park. So a nice little touch there to kind of seal the idea that she's able to do a better job than the best code breaker in the US, because she's the best code breaker in Britain, effectively. Yeah. So nice little call out there. John, do you want to give us your next point?
It's basically Wynne Everett as Whitney Frost. As the episodes have gone on, I absolutely think she is knocking this part out of the park. I'm loving her. I love how she looks so fragile and porcelain now that this crack from this fissure is going across her face. The blackness of the fissure and the paleness of her skin. She looks like a doll that's kind of slowly cracking. And I love how she puts on the frail side, but then it is absolutely driven and ruthless. And I love how she has Carlton Chadwick under her thumb. Absolutely. And I found this was just brilliant in this episode, where she's experimenting with the lab rats to see how this new power that she's found, how it works. She's, it links back to her flashbacks of this inquisitive girl, and then this intelligent and talented lady, refused access to the universities to study, and so, goes down a different route. And I think Wynne Everett is playing an absolute blinder in this part. And each episode, I'm loving Whitney Frost. Absolutely loving it. And this was excellent. I love seeing this fissure slowly moving across her face.
You have to at least call it your name for it, John. Come on.
Frost's fissured face. Yeah.
There you go.
the 3 Fs. But if my tongue can only cope with it, Frost fissured face, you have to really think about saying it. But I love it. I'm really liking it. I'm liking how potentially it's linking in with Wilkes as well. I'm going to actually steal my.
That's one of my points.
Oh, I'm so. Oh my goodness! I was going to say, I'm going to steal my 4th point and just mix them, because you see that Wilkes can see this fissure on the blackboard at one stage, and it's the, are Whitney's experiments beginning to sort of upset whatever balance it is, or is her power growing where she's influencing Wilkes? How is this happening? And actually, the question I had as well is, can Wilkes actually be saved, or is he a lost cause? Is he doomed? Claire?
Was that a question? I like that the sort of fissure that he sees looks just like the one on her face.
Yeah.
But also it reminded me of Doctor Who, like in the first Matt Smith with the crack in time. I really like that.
True, yeah.
And I don't know if you guys mentioned it before on the podcast about like Wilkes's equivalent in the comics. Did you mention that?
Chris did. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I couldn't remember if you did or not. I don't think he can be saved personally, because
I have that feeling.
We're going into a bit of a love triangle with Wilkes and Sousa. We saw Sousa giving Peggy longing looks in this episode when she's sort of chatting with Wilkes. I've got a feeling that Wilkes is going to sacrifice himself in somehow, which I kind of hope he doesn't, because he will be that then. It's again sort of with one of my points. He will then be the third guy that's kind of died in Peggy's life. You know, we have her brother, we have Steve Rogers, then we have this, and I kind of hope that's not the way it's going, but I feel it's the way it's going. And the reason I hope it's not the way it's going is because I feel like then the thing with her brother was very close to becoming the male equivalent of the woman in the refrigerator, if you know what I mean, in that it's where you have a death of a female character, which is what drives the male character forward, which the show Supernatural is notorious for, because that's all they do. But I don't, I love that it's we have Peggy as a strong female character, but to make her strong, you don't have to go the other way and take away from the male characters as well, if you know what I mean. I would like it to be more balanced. This is one of my points. Going into my point was that I love the the actor who plays Michael Carter, her brother, in the short time he's in it. But I kind of wish they kept him alive. And he's just a character that could have shown up again. It wasn't his death that propelled Peggy into action, only because it echoes so much about what happens with Steve Rogers later and what I get the feeling might happen with Wilkes. And I'd kind of like there to be this character that's on Peggy's side, but in the end, it was her decision without Michael being killed.
Right.
It was her decision to go, actually, I don't want to marry this guy. My brother has faith in me. I have faith in myself. Not my brother had faith in me and now he's passed away and I feel like I should do it in his memory. I don't think it was just that, but it could be taken that way in the show. So that was, again, one of my points that had good and bad in, because I really liked the actor who played that role in the very short time we saw him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, I thought it was kind of a combination of those two things. I definitely thought that ultimately it was her choice, but to begin with, it's maybe that she did want to do the SOE, but was being restrained by her fiance. And then they were playing together as children in the first flashback, as you said, fighting the dragon. That there was an honor element that, she knew he had recommended her because he saw that she could do it. I think it was that in conjunction with the fact that maybe she had always wanted to do this kind of thing. It seemed like that's what she wanted to do. But obviously, I think that's why I called him stifling, her fiance. It was that, and actually, I'm not going to do it now, but it's one of my points later on, which is a direct quote from her fiance, which I found really, really interesting. But definitely, I agree with you. It's definitely her choice. But obviously, these extraneous factors kind of all sort of help as well, I think.
Yeah. I love it. The one thing I love about our podcast is when all of our points converge. It's really good fun.
I know. They are converging big time.
They're doing quite well here because I do have Peggy's brother Michael, particularly as a character himself and what he actually gives throughout the very short scenes that we see. Obviously, there's a lot else that goes on between the two of them. But I'm wondering that not only was his death, or I suppose hopefully his death wasn't the only thing that propelled her into going into the SOE. I'm wondering if it's much more the kind of background we got about him, effectively, that the relationship with him led her to find the kind of men that she falls into or falls into friendships with in the future. Jarvis, Steve, and Howard particularly are three friends that support her, take care of her, and drive her into the life of adventure that she so loves, That seems to be Michael's place in her life, was the guy that drove her towards adventure and helped her out and pushed her towards the kind of life that she wanted to lead. So I'm wondering if that's more the legacy he had, and maybe just his death is the kind of realization of what am I doing here? Not I'm going to do it in his honor, more so what am I doing with my life? I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
It's more. I would just hope we don't get into the pattern. Like if the series did go on if the show did go on for a lot of series, I just hope we wouldn't get into the pattern of
kill off her lovers.
Yeah,
maybe Wilkes will survive then.
Yeah,
maybe he will.
Yeah, I hope he does. I mean, I really like the I really like the character and the actor. I like the fact that you can see what she would find attractive in him. in a different way to Steve Rogers and Sousa.
There's that great moment at the opening of the episode when she says to Wilkes, "That must be very frustrating for you." There's a lovely bit of sexual tension between the two of them there that you can really feel the passion between the two of them. And I suppose one of my favorite moments from Captain America: Winter Soldier, at the moment when Steve sits down with her as an old woman on her deathbed, and we find out that she's had a whole life without him and had a relationship and has had kids and has had a husband, but was still able to lead this life in S.H.I.E.L.D. For many, many years. And hopefully that's kind of stuff that we will see in a season 3 or 4 of the show, that she's able to live a life with a romantic interest and also have the life in S.H.I.E.L.D. And hopefully they don't just kill off her partner.
That it's not like a Bond situation where, they can't have any form of loving relationship because they're, detached spies.
Yeah. We need to find out who that husband ends up being.
I'm
still convinced that because we haven't found out all the details about I think it's Sousa. And because we haven't found out all the details about Sousa's injury, I'm just waiting for when he actually says, "Oh yeah, by the way, it was Captain America that saved me," and we'll be like, "Oh my God, her husband."
Oh, we never know.
And he's just holding it close to his chest. That's my theory, everyone.
Excellent. I'd love that. That was my point as well, Peggy's brother Michael. So I'm trying to work out, is it Claire or John? Claire,
I think it's Claire. It's Claire. It's definitely Claire, because I had 2 in 1.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
My last point was I just like Whitney stepping up to be a badass in the last scene, and turning Hunt into like little pixels. As I put in my notes, she lawnmower mans him, but with better special effects, because he like goes blah, 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 and turns into little pixels. I felt bad for the rats earlier because I love rats. I used to have pet rats, and I felt bad that they got turned into pixels. Hunt not so much because he was a horrible guy.
Yes,
but I just love Whitney kind of, stepping up and being, to her husband and being like, "Oh, I have something to show you, by the way."
Oh, it was so good. I love that she, as the conversation was going on, she was also closing the curtains around the room to hide this from the outside world. Really interesting.
That's a great little bit of detail from the writers or the actress or the director, whoever was, that was the direction given, whether it was from herself or from the script or from the director. It's just those little points where you go, that makes absolute sense, and it just fits so nicely to that scene, and what she then does it's a great little thing.
Definitely. And I know I shouldn't be thinking it. I know I'm supposed to be thinking about Zero Matter or Dark Matter, but I'm still thinking this is like Venom from Spider-Man.
It does look like that.
It just feels like that's a really cool version of Venom, that she's the symbiote is melding with her and taking on this stuff. I'd love if that was the big reveal in a couple episodes. This isn't Dark Matter. We were lying to you. It's actually the symbiote has come down and taken over Whitney Frost.
It could be, it's so different, obviously, the character's origins in comics to Madame Mask, but so it could be anything. Every time I see it, I always think it's like a black version of the ether from Thor: The Dark World. That's what it reminds me of. I don't think it's going to be an Infinity Stone because it would affect later continuity, but if it was the Venom symbiote, that would be amazing.
You never know. Maybe they got that back in the deal when they got Spider-Man back for Civil War.
There'll be someone entering the office,
like
cool. the office to interview Peggy, and he'll be like, "My name's Eddie Brock," or they won't be able to use Eddie Brock because it's Sony, so he'll be like, "My name's Teddy
Rock."
Teddy Rock.
Love it. John, do you have your final points?
I do. It's my quote. It's from Peggy's fiance, Fred. I just thought it summed it up really well. I thought the line captured kind of war, actually, and it's the one thing I've learned from the war is a boring life is a privilege. Now, it sounds weird to say, but it's that sort of difference between and the conflict between the heroic nature of war and one of where you're just plain scared. I mean, I took it that he was saying that in a way that I think there's 2 ways you could take it. One is maybe the upper classes staying behind the lines, that First World War type of mentality, or the idea that what he's maybe saying is it's a small thing to have a boring life in the middle of such death, destruction, and so on, that small thing, that idea of just being scared of going into the fray, which, you can be. I thought it was a really interesting line, and I thought it summed up so much about warfare, about cowardice, conflict, heroics. Is it working class versus upper class in terms of, being sent in over the top or in the heat of battle. It's a really interesting quote, I thought. And of course, just in relation to that scene, you have, Fred sat there, who's obviously, has a desk job in one of the ministries. And then you have Peggy's brother Michael sat opposite him, who obviously is in the action. It's those two sides of the coin at that table, with Peggy in the middle deciding where to go and what to do. And I thought that was a really lovely sort of line from the script that played really neatly in that scene and summed up really the choice that Peggy had, and I suppose what people would have in a warfare situation, kind of thing. So that's my final point. I just thought it was a really kind of encapsulated a lot in a very small sentence, I thought.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you've gotten all my points, I think, between all of us. So I don't actually have a final point, but I do love that one. Definitely. I love the discussion there between Michael and Fred. I also just, my one quick note, I love Michael's response to Fred's discussion of, so how goes it at the front lines? And he goes, well, there's a lot of Nazis shooting at me. Just kind of a nice little line from the episode. Really, really enjoyed it. Claire, do you have any notes about the episode? Any other points that we may not have covered?
Only a little one, which is every time there's a scene in the lab, I just think how much I want that jukebox that's in the background. The old sort of like Wurlitzer the jukebox. Every time I see it, I'm I want one of those so bad. I did spend a bit of the scene, and I had to rewind it because I was just looking at it going, I really want one. That's my only other note, really, because it's every time it appears, I want one.
Excellent. Always wanted one when I was a kid. I remember seeing one when I went over to America for the first time and realizing it was about $2,000 and saying I'll probably make do with iTunes.
And you can probably, you can only get so many songs on there. I have an iPod that has 50,000 songs on it. Yeah. But it's so cool looking.
Absolutely.
One.
John, do you have any other notes about the episode?
Two, actually. It was Vernon Masters coming in and talking about the tidal wave coming.
The rising tide coming.
Is the rising tide from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Possibly.
And that you and your friends can still drown. And he called out something as well, which I'm kind of glad he did, which was, a lady in your position as a foreign national working on American soil. That hits that era totally spot on, that she sounds different, she behaves different, and therefore she is a suspect.
Oh yeah.
That to me was really good.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I was wondering about, and I know you mentioned about the death of President McKinley earlier on, and whether that was involved in the Arena Club as well. So they did mention two other things. They mentioned about Black Tuesday, which was the beginning of the Great Depression, and also the Hollywood 10 is mentioned in the discussions with him as well. So I'm wondering if all three of these elements they're saying are being caused by the Arena Club. So if this was effectively saying that McCarthyism wasn't being driven by McCarthy, it was being driven by this group of nine, effectively. So it's really interesting to have this, I suppose, what would you call them, the Illuminati behind all of these things. So.
Yes, the Illuminati.
Different Illuminati.
Different Illuminati. Yeah. Bad Illuminati. Yeah, and of course, as you say, Kurtwood Smith from RoboCop and that 70s show, as you said, Claire, I mean, he does kind of evil pretty well, and subdued menace as well. Just, I love that interaction that he had with Peggy in Chief Sousa's office. I like the fact that Chief Sousa kind of dismissed it. He said, yeah, I had that conversation as well. That's not going to scare me. Here's something that I've kept back. So I like that. And then just the interrogation by Peggy of Mr. Hunt. It's just that I like the way she framed that sometimes, to deal with men like you, we have to employ, the methods. She was obviously, threatening him, in a way that says, sometimes we have to go beyond where we would normally would in order to stop men like you.
Mm.
And just the whole double cross and the trick, putting a bug on him, to go back. And I like the fact that the bug actually obviously gets consumed, when Whitney Frost does her thing on Mr. Hunt. I presume it's either it's turned to black goo and is now in Whitney, or maybe just, and destroyed. But I like that.
Maybe they've got a tracker on inside Whitney.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
What if Whitney takes on all the personalities of when she consumes someone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Does that mean she's now part rat?
Part
She's
rat,
consumed a
part
ton of
fish.
rats.
Yeah.
It is really interesting that they're all seeping inside her as well. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, will that radio just kick back in again, and it will be, at some point, and they will hear Whitney again, with like a stomach rumbling, maybe, or I don't know, or something.
You never know.
Squeak, squeak.
I think that's all we have about this episode of Agent Carter. Claire, as you're the guest, you get to tell us whether you defend this episode of Agent Carter or not.
I do, because I really enjoyed it, and I love seeing the flashbacks. I love the character of Peggy. It was just missing Howard Stark. I love Howard Stark. I wish he was in it, but we got lots of other cool stuff instead, so yes.
That's cool. Derek, do you defend this episode of Peggy Carter?
Do you know what? I do. I didn't think I would when I saw it first. I watched this on Thursday night while we were doing our usual live tweet. And I was kind of feeling I wasn't enjoying it as much as I normally do, or I have this season. The season's been really, really strong, particularly in comparison to the first season. It's been much stronger every episode. And then realized I probably was putting a lot too much weight on the episode. When I watched it again to take my notes and to do my show notes for the episode, I really enjoyed it. There's a lot going on, and I love the parallels between the characters. I love seeing, the war effort from the UK point of view within Bletchley Park. I love seeing, a lot of the stuff about the backstory of Whitney Frost and where she came from. Really enjoyable. I definitely defend this episode. And John, our final defender, do you defend this episode?
I do. I do defend this episode of Agent Carter. A bit like yourself, I was slightly unsure when I first saw it, but on second watch and on third watch, in fact, I really, really enjoyed this. And as a result, I am going to give this 4 cute, jarvelous koalas out of 5. Definitely, for me, I loved the whole concept of the smoke and mirrors. I loved the flashbacks to these 2 ladies who are now kind of become adversaries. I think Whitney Frost, played by Wynne Everett, I'm just absolutely loving what she's doing with that character. I love the nods back to hit the Bletchley Park Special Operations Executive. Again, the council and their influence in society. All those little nods are great. I liked the experimentation with the zero matter and sort of Wilkes being able to see the fissure on the blackboard. I really want to see how that pans out, how his character develops. And this was, for me, just again another really strong episode with so much going on. It made me want to watch the next episode again. So yeah, absolutely defend this episode of Agent Carter. Really good.
Excellent. Good stuff. Three strong defends this week. Like it. Impressive. I think it's time to talk to the listeners. A little bit of feedback from our listeners this week. Our first piece of feedback comes from the 108 Sage. He says, hello again, John, Chris and Derek, and probably Claire if he knew you were here. He starts out with, the reason I'm writing is Agent Carter has been so good this season. I'm 4 episodes in, and since I watched it on Hulu, which time shifts back a week, I'm actually much closer to the schedule you're all are on than most of the US audience. But yet, this season has totally lived up to the high expectations I had, loving season 1 as much as I did. I totally dig what they're doing with Whitney Frost and the photo relationship. That's wrong. And the proto relationship between Carter and Wilkes has been a joy to behold. Jarvis has been in top form and his wife kicks butt. And I think this is the best I've ever seen Howard Stark. I'm so intrigued to see where the show takes us. Before I close, I just want to say how much I loved the way Jessica Jones unfolded. So many elements were surprising and perfect. And he says the rest was deleted to avoid spoilers. Funnily enough, I glanced at the first email I sent and it turns out it was after I'd seen episode 4 of that show too. Who knows, I might actually write again in some time before episode 4 of Daredevil. Thanks very much for that, 108 Sage. Really interesting thoughts. So he's also on the similar side to ourselves that the show is going from strength to strength.
Absolutely, yeah. And I like, and would definitely agree the Howard Stark aspect, and I loved the interaction. I think we said last week between Jarvis and Howard Stark, and how it mirrored obviously the current relationship. Obviously not in artificial intelligence Jarvis wise, but like I love how he was there helping Howard Stark with the experiments. Oh God, don't let me be caught, and to be a voice in a machine, really good little nods. And I think Howard here is doing really well. I'm loving Dominic Cooper, reprise his role as well. He's had some really good stuff so far this season. And I agree with Claire. Can't wait to have a bit more of him in the show.
Yeah. How are you finding Howard Stark, Claire?
I love Howard Stark. I am a big fan of Dominic Cooper's as well.
Mm-hmm.
I actually knew him a bit from his theatre days in London, and he's a really great guy. He was part of the crowd with, the History Boys crowd with, and at the National Theatre with James Corden, Jamie Parker, who's going to be Harry Potter in the Harry Potter play that's coming out, and he was also in a play I saw with Russell Tovey, who's done fantastic. A few films and stuff. Yeah. So I'm really happy that he's part of Marvel now. I like that he isn't just Tony Stark. Mm-hmm. He's not playing the same character, much as I like that Edwin Jarvis isn't just Jarvis, But there's obviously the similarities. You can see Tony Stark being the son of Howard Stark. Absolutely. I really like it. I hope that if there is a season 3, we get Howard Stark in it still. Obviously, I guess that will depend on how successful Preacher is as well, which he's the lead in.
That's right, yeah.
He's playing Jesse Custer, a very different role to Howard Stark.
Very much so, yeah.
But I really hope that, we get more of him, because I like him and Peggy as unlikely allies, and I like the fact that we know from sort of, I think he was in Ant-Man, wasn't he? We know that they are sort of allies for life pretty much presumably until Howard Stark passes away.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely love Howard Stark. Thanks very much for the feedback, 108 Sage.
Yeah, thanks, 108 Sage.
Our next piece of feedback comes from a regular contributor to our Facebook group, which you can find if you just search for Defenders TV Podcast over on Facebook. Come join the group. It's good chat. Claire's on there all the time as well. And we have Ronaldo, who sends in some feedback to us about Agent Carter. He says, "Hey guys, episode 4 was quite entertaining, despite being a double origin story, which can sometimes be a bit cliched. Having said that, it's becoming a staple for all Marvel properties, so it was only a matter of time for us to delve into Peggy's past. The parallels of both Peggy and Agnes not being what they truly are was a nice touch, though. More into the phenomenon that is Wilkes was also quite entertaining, and the calling he senses is quite intriguing. Is it to another dimension? Is that where Frost's victims end up, as touched upon in the previous podcast? Jarvis for me gets better and better, and his comic foils are refreshing at times, but I hope he doesn't get pigeonholed as the clown. I did like it how they showed a slight annoyance on the others and assumed he would serve them drinks. His sleep talking about horses also made me laugh out loud."
Yeah.
And then finally he says, also like the small homage to Madame Mask with the quick shot of the Greek comedy and tragedy masks. Frost is gearing up to be quite the big bad. Look out, Peggy. Kind regards, Ronaldo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ronaldo, for that feedback again. Yeah, I think the Wilkes phenomenon is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Another dimension, I kind of hope that's where it leads us to. I don't Claire, I know you like your heroes grounded in reality, which I do too, I hasten to add, but I also like, as you probably are aware, a little bit of Doctor Strange in a completely non-real way. So I kind of am loving this aspect to the show, and I really want to see, is Whitney's continuing use of this power, how that's going to affect Wilkes, because I think there's sort of that kind of ripple effect going on to him. So it'll be interesting if suddenly he kind of gets pulled into that. And that's why I wonder, is he going to survive all of this? That's the big thing for me with Wilkes at the moment. And then, I suppose we've touched on Jarvis. Maybe possibly some of that comedy and comedic aspect does need to get a bit pared back for him. But again, it's good that he does show that annoyance. That
Absolutely.
He's not just a butler. He's a good pet keeper.
Absolutely. It's a good call out from Ronaldo, and I didn't notice it at the time. It's a good call out from where he's effectively, everybody's kind of going, oh, I could use a drink right now, and looks at Jarvis and he goes, I'll get the whole bottle kind of thing. It's a nice little call out. He'd be a great drink server for Jessica Jones, really, wouldn't he?
I really would.
Whiskey again.
A bottle of whiskey, anyone?
I wonder if the Zero Matter there'll be like a tie-in between Agent Carter and when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comes back, because they're sort of dealing with other dimensions and things in that, and they've linked them up before with the obelisk. They've linked that obviously with Agent Carter before with the Howling Commandos appearing in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., didn't they? And getting that. So I wonder if this is going to be a link with what's going on in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And I would say with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter being at the Ultimates in Blackpool, I think that is a really good question to ask about whether there is any possible crossover or connection, I suppose more correctly, with this dark goo. And dimensions and fissures and Brett Ward having some kind of gunky thing squirming about in his head at the moment. And
spoilers.
Spoilers.
Maybe it will link in with Doctor Strange as well, because that's coming out this year. Maybe. No.
I know. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping for a global connection in the Marvel universe to everything Doctor Strange, but that's not going to happen.
I think it's very likely that we will have the connection between Agent Carter and Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that connection will seep into Doctor Strange, if I choose my words carefully there. Yeah, I think that's quite likely.
But I am still hoping for the connection to Defenders as well.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I would love more connection between Defenders and the films. I don't know how much we'll get. I don't think we'll get that much, but I would love that. But then again, I would be excited to see a character like Daredevil interact with a character like Thor. But then I'm also like, I could do with them being apart. The two little worlds, they're very different.
Yeah.
Mainly, I just want Matt Murdock to take Tony Stark down in a verbal smackdown is what I want.
Oh, yes.
That would make me very happy.
So that's our feedback for this week. If you want to send us in your feedback, just send it to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much for all the feedback to Ronaldo and 108 Sage. That's really good. And of course, you can follow us and leave feedback not only at the email, but also at DefendersCast on Twitter, and also join the group at Defenders TV Podcast on Facebook, and you can leave comments there if you want to as well.
It's the best Defenders podcast related group on Facebook. I can say that because ours is a page and not a group, so I can say that.
There you go. Perfect. Claire, it has been an absolute pleasure having you join us this week and take the place of Chris.
Yeah, thank you
so much. It's been great.
Much.
Thank you so much. I definitely would like to come back. If you need a last minute guest.
The invitation is always open for you to come and join us. We love having you on board, and we love chatting with you as always. Do you want to tell the listeners again where they can find your podcast?
Sure. We're on WordPress.com as Defenders Podcast. Twitter is @DefendersPod. All of our Facebook posts go through to Twitter as well. So if you just want to follow news about the Defenders shows, the Netflix shows. You can follow the Twitter. Generally, it's me. So if you want to tweet me, tweet at Defenders Pod. I'm really the only one that kind of looks after it.
That's because you don't let the rest of them read the news stories.
Exactly. I have to read everything. So feel free to tweet us and go, hi, Claire, because it will come through to me. Or on Facebook, if you search all in caps for Defenders Podcast, you should find our page. It's got a little blue logo with New York and little hidden ninjas at the bottom, which my co-host Mel drew. It's very cool.
Excellent.
Generally, we just post news about the Defenders shows. We do a little bit about Agent Carter, and we do a little bit about other stuff going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But if you want news about Agent Carter, I'd say definitely listen to these guys instead, because you guys know much more about it than we do.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. And definitely, listeners, check out the podcast. It's really good fun. Definitely a good compliment for the Netflix shows.
We've had some fun guests on, and so we've had some good interviews as well. So if you want to hear from some of the people involved in the makings of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, we recently had one of the writers of Jessica Jones on, which was great. He was Edward Reichert. He was awesome. I interviewed one of the actresses from Jessica Jones, Susie Abramite, who plays Pam. She was great. Hopefully we've got some more coming up. We interviewed a load of people from Daredevil. Hopefully we'll have some interviews for Daredevil season 2 as well. As I said, we're a bit more all over the place than this much more better organised podcast. But mainly that's because I'm running it, and I'm very disorganised.
Not at all. It's great. It's really good fun to have you guys, and great to have you on board, Claire. Definitely.
Absolutely.
With that, I think it's time to close out the episode. I'm off to be whoever I want.
I just want to say thank you again to Claire for coming on. It has been great, and thank you so much for listening. As always, we will speak again shortly. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a Flickering Myth Podcast Network production. For more information, head over to flickeringmyth.com for more shows like it. Find this show in iTunes by searching for the podcast name, and head over to youtube.com/flickeringmyth to subscribe to the Flickering Myth movie show. We'll see you on the next podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.